Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started this morning. So, good morning, depending on where you are. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar presented by OnSpring, How Internal Audit Adjusts for the Future. Conversations with a couple of key internal audit leaders. I'm really looking forward to this. We have a great session planned today. But before we get started, let me just take care of a couple of quick housekeeping items. All attendees are going to be invited in, and your phones are going to be on mute. So you won't be an active participant, but certainly you can feel free to leverage the Q&A feature at the bottom of the, or in your Zoom controls to pose any questions to us as we go through. And some of you have already submitted some great questions. We're going to try to address those as we go through. Throughout the presentation, we're going to invite you to participate in a couple of different polls so we can get your insight, your feedback on a couple of the topics that we're talking about. So look for those as we go through. And finally, this session will be recorded. I know that's a common question on these types of presentations. It will be recorded. We will absolutely share the recording with you and your team members once we're done. So again, welcome everybody, and really excited to have you here today. Okay, so first let's just start with some quick introductions. Who are you looking at here? Who are you dealing with? First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jason Rolfe. I'm the Vice President of Solutions here with OnSpring. My team is responsible for building and maintaining all of the solutions that we go to market with on the OnSpring platform. We also support the sales and marketing function by performing demonstrations of the product, building proofs of concept, and feeding information to the marketing team about the folks that we're working with on a regular basis. Really excited to be here with you, but more excited because of my fellow panelists. So first, I'd like to introduce Steve Brown. So Steve currently serves as the Chief Audit Executive for Booz Allen Hamilton. Steve has several years of experience, not trying to date you there, Steve, but several years of experience leading internal audit and operational risk functions in the financial services world, in the technology world, and now in the consulting world. Steve's also an active member of the Atlanta chapter of the Institute of Internal Auditors, and he's currently serving as their head of, what is it, Steve? Your certification chair of the Atlanta IAA.
Right.
So Steve,
certification
welcome.
officer, yep.
Yep, absolutely. So welcome,
Thanks.
Steve.
Thanks, and Jason, thanks to you and to the team at OnSpring for hosting us today. I'm glad to be here. If you guys will all indulge me for a second, let me give you my disclaimer. I'm glad to be here, but I wouldn't want anyone to think that any of my comments are speaking on or behalf of my current employer or any of my former employers. I'm just a guy who's gotten old enough to have been doing this for 25 years. So I have some thoughts on the subject, but no one should take any of my comments as to mean that I actually know what I'm talking about. So Jason, thank you for having us today.
Well, I'll respectfully disagree. You absolutely know what you're talking about, but definitely understand where you're coming from there. All right. And then let's also introduce our other panelist, Jim Edstrom. Jim Edstrom actually currently serves as the Senior Vice President and Chief Audit Executive at Cboe Global Markets. He leads his team through a dynamic and highly regulated environment and has years of experience leading IT and audit and assurance functions within the Big Four and within private industry. Also, Steve, as an adjunct professor at DePaul University, he actually developed and taught a class on IT audit from 2009 to 2018. And since 2016, Jim has been a volunteer for the IAA's Global IT Guidance Committee. So Jim, welcome.
Well, thank you, Jason. Very excited to be here along with Steve, and looking forward to a good discussion. I really think you set the stage that this is just an opportunity to have a discussion, to, I think about these ideas, to learn from each other, and looking forward to the dialogue. I echo Steve's comments. This is my perspective, not my employer. Since you said that, I might as well just reiterate that. You do have me, Steve, I think by 1 year. I'm at 24, so you're at 25. So I will learn from you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, guys. And really, thank you so much to both of these guys for being here and making time. Obviously, with given the topic of conversation that we're going to have, and given all that's going on, certainly there's a lot of other stuff these guys are dealing with. So we really appreciate you guys making the time. Okay, so let's talk about today's conversation, right? Today we're going to try to pull out our proverbial crystal ball and look a little bit into the future here. So given all that's happening in the world with the global pandemic, with just kind of things shifting in terms of how we're able to interact with others, how we're able to work. Obviously, there's a lot of things in flux. So what we're really interested in exploring today are some concepts of how might the world of internal audit look different, or how might it change going into the future, both in the near term as well as trying to look into the long term. I think the three of us have known each other for a while, and none of us obviously purports themselves to be the end-all be-all expert in this area. So we don't want to come to you and think that we have all of the answers, but rather what we're trying to do is facilitate a real conversation around this. Get a couple of guys who are in the thick of it right now with their respective departments, share some of their experience, and really just spark some thought and some ideas. That's really what we're after today. So the 5 topics that we're going to discuss today, and we're going to address each one of these in order. First off is just kind of the overall, how do we make sure that internal audit is aligned with the strategic direction of the organization? Is this more important now? Has this completely changed the way internal audit is going to think about how they plan and how they execute their audit plan? We're also going to talk a little bit about the future of, call it co-sourcing, outsourcing, but I think, the three of us talked a little bit about this, and we'll probably even go a little bit broader than that and think about just talent management in general. How is the audit department going to be staffed? What is that going to look like? Certainly, we're going to address the technology aspect. What does this mean to the adoption of the use of technology or more advanced technologies within internal audit? We'll explore the concept of internal audit as sort of an education source within the organization. This is something that I've experienced in my own time as an internal auditor, and I know these guys experience as well. Kind of that unique position that audit has in the organization. Is there a way to maybe exploit that or take more advantage of that in the future? And then finally, we talk about physical workspace, but certainly just the concept of how will we work, right? And this is probably the more human element of this whole thing. Where are people going to reside? How are we going to remain connected? So we want to explore all of these topics together today. Okay, so with that, let's just dive right into our first topic. So the way this is going to work, guys, is I'm just going to kind of throw out some ideas, and we're going to talk about some basic concepts. And really, I'm going to be looking to Jim and Steve to give their perspective, because again, these are the guys who are currently dealing with this and managing departments through this type of crisis. So one prediction. Right? Internal audit's going to be required to refocus and only focus on auditing and reviewing parts of the organization that are strategically aligned. We think about all of the traditional cyclical reviews, the once every 2 years, or even some of the consulting efforts that internal audit has branched out into. Maybe the reins are going to be pulled in tighter, or maybe some of those nice to have audits are really going to go by the wayside. Again, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen, but that's why I have Jim and Steve here. So are these things going to stop, or is internal audit really going to be required to rethink how they focus their efforts? So I'm going to start with Jim. Jim, how do you kind of read this from your perspective? Do you think this is going to be the case? And I guess it almost begs the deeper question: how well aligned is internal audit in general with those strategic objectives?
So, Jason, I think it really is the appropriate question to ask to start our discussion this afternoon. The first thing that I would point out is that really when you look at the internal audit standards, this is really something that we should always be focused on. So our core principles of internal auditing emphasize the importance of the audit department aligned with strategies, risks, and objectives of the organization. So that's fundamentally something we should be doing to demonstrate essentially compliance with the standards. I think the deeper question to really be thinking about right now in this environment is, given that the boards and management are reevaluating strategy given the current environment, what role can audit play to add value in the context of that? To me, that is the question that should be on the mind of individuals in audit departments and leaders within audit functions. Companies will be reevaluating their strategies. We'll be thinking about what this means both today and going forward. And this is really an opportunity for the audit function to frankly have a seat at the table, if they don't already, to understand how the changing environment is impacting strategy, and ultimately what that means from the role of internal audit. The key word that comes to mind as well that I think should be a word that we use often when we think about the role of internal audit is value. How can we add value in the context of all the change that's going on? How can we support these efforts? And that's sort of a key mind set that I think we should have in this environment. But fundamentally, I think that the notion of strategic alignment, it's something we always should be doing. I frankly think the challenge right now is understanding what the COVID pandemic means to your company, to your stakeholders, and how can your audit department evolve to align with that strategy and continue to evolve and adapt.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim. Thinking about, rooting everything in the standards is never a bad place to start, right? Because it is sort of it's not very prescriptive. They're not very prescriptive. They're a little bit more of a guide point, and it's all about how you apply that. And so, Steve, I want to get your perspective on this as well. Obviously, there is a shift that's happening, or a shift that's going to be required. Do you think that auditors are kind of well equipped for this? And if so, kind of what sort of sets them up for success to be maybe a little bit more nimble in how they view things?
Sure. Well, let me share a couple of thoughts with you, Jason, that I've been thinking about recently. And so the first is I've been thinking about the audit report that's going to get written in 12 or 18 months from now. And I'm 100% confident this report's going to get written somewhere. And the report's going to read somewhere along the lines of, we did an audit of XYZ business process, and we found that during the global pandemic, there were lots of manual process overrides and exception processing and a lack of documentation. And so we recommend that management better prepare for the next unforeseen, unprecedented systemic global crisis. And I don't want to be the person who writes that audit report. And I don't want any of the 133 people who are on this call to be the people who write that audit report either. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, so please indulge me. But I think that's one of the things, that's the pitfalls that we have to look out for, right? We have to avoid the pitfall of just looking backwards and restating the obvious. And so as I think about the path forward, one of the things that I hope I learned through the last economic cycle, when we went through the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, one of the things that comes to mind is the stress that these events put on our business processes and our controls. And the example that resonates with me is, when you look at the mortgage foreclosure crisis, the volume of mortgage foreclosures increased by 1,000% overnight, and processes and controls were not able to handle the volume. And so there was a stress that was associated with volume that broke those processes in a lot of ways. I don't think it's going to be a volume stress play as we go through this set of events, but I think we have an opportunity as internal auditors to get in front of this a little bit and to go back to our stakeholders and our process owners and our business leaders, our partners, and have a conversation around what does stress in the economy, in our business processes and our controls look like, and how can we start to be more proactive in where is there stress and how can we partner with management to help resolve that. And in some cases that might be working with them to come up with a solution or a corrective action or different process. In other cases, it might be as simple as, well, we're here to help you document the things that you've had to do to get through this set of events so that we have a record of it going forward. I think by being focused on where's there stress in our processes and stress in our controls, we can be more nimble and more focused on the current set of events and not write that hypothetical audit report that I referred to.
Yeah, I think you couldn't have picked a more apt word than stress, right? And I realize that has a lot of different connotations, but you're right. It is stressing your business's ability to kind of do what they've set out to do, because they set out to do it in a completely different sort of environment, right? A completely different set of reality than we're dealing with now. So I think there's a lot of, kind of being flexible is what I heard there, right? Being able to kind of work with them and partner with them, and kind of to that point, and sort of shifting just a little bit back to you, Jim, I'm kind of curious too, and this is actually a question that one of the participants submitted before the presentation here. Are you getting any sort of pushback, or what sort of feedback are you getting from your management chain or from the board of directors on where you should be directing your audit efforts, and maybe in light of that?
So, kind of building on Steve's point too, I think that we have to also go back and understand the role that we have in terms of the third line of defense. So I think, to Steve's point, it's really understanding where the controls are changing, and understanding that that's an opportunity for us to provide assurance, to understand what those changes are, to potentially do some audit work. But there's really two key roles when I think of internal audit. It's the traditional assurance role, which, given what we have going on, that clearly is an area that we can add value. Understanding through our risk assessment, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but understanding through our risk assessment methodology, where are the risks changing and where can audit add some value from an assurance perspective. But the other side of it that I think we we have an opportunity is really more the advisory or the change assurance role. So as the organization continues to change and evolve, where can we participate, and to Steve's point, support management and provide that effective challenge as that third line of defense to consider ways that we're adapting and evolving the business model. So I think those are important. In terms of stakeholder expectations, I think right now everyone expects that a couple of words come to mind is that we're all trying to learn together, and I think that was really kind of, Jason, how you teed up our discussion this morning. I think boards and senior management are placing expectations on audit to help understand the risks that we're dealing with, so that we can have appropriate strategies, appropriate actions in terms of how we address these going forward as an organization. But overall, I think the expectations are is that we continue to adapt. I think that's a key word, to be agile, to be responsive to these new environments. And I think that's, really on my mind, we're going to talk about a lot of concepts this morning, but many of the traditional ideas that we have in terms of, long-term planning, in a lot of respects go out the door. We have to be very adaptive in terms of how we think about risk assessment, frankly, how we execute the risk assessment, how the information that we use to develop the risk assessment, the approaches to how we conduct audits. This is really an opportunity for us to reevaluate many components to how we do the work of internal audits. So.
Absolutely, Jim. Yeah, and you guys both make some great points. And again, the key words I keep hearing are, adaptability, flexibility, being a little bit more nimble, and really kind of going where the risks are. And kind of goes back to what Jim was saying about the standards, right? That's what the standards really dictate, is things need to be a little bit more fluid. And that word agile that you brought up, Jim, it's definitely timely, because, we've been hearing, and you and I have talked quite a bit about it, just a little bit more about the concept of agile auditing, really going where the risk exists. So maybe it's an increase in the frequency, or maybe a change in the nature of how you evaluate where your efforts should be going. So I appreciate that. Just in the interest of keeping us moving into different topics, I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll. So with the folks on the call, feel free to kind of provide your response here. We're just kind of curious to know if there are any strategic or non-strategic, I should say, activities that you guys might be working on potentially eliminating from your audit plan. I really like watching this because the results change in real time. Realistically speaking, I know we could probably talk for the whole hour on this particular topic. This is definitely where the most interest was. But I will tell you that, being agile, being nimble, I think that's sort of the theme here that at least that I'm hearing. Yeah, so I'll tell you what, get a couple more seconds on the poll, and then I'm going to go ahead and just close that out. It looks like everyone's pretty much put in their thoughts here. So I'm going to go ahead and end and share those results. Okay, so can you guys see those, Steve, Jim? Can you guys see those results? Yeah, so it looks like the biggest, or the biggest target of elimination, let's say, are those kind of cyclical audit reviews. I remember doing those a lot when, back in my audit days, and I'm sure you guys have some that sort of fall into that bucket. I think it's not to say that auditors are never going to review those types of areas. I believe what this is telling us, and I'm interested to hear, maybe Steve, start with your opinion, but I believe what this is telling us is we're not going to audit for auditing's sake. We're not going to audit just because a certain amount of time has elapsed. Rather, we're going to kind of put everything into this view of, does it really make sense given our current environment?
Jason, I completely agree with that. And I think that, and just thinking and piggybacking off of what Jim said, and the use of the word agile, right? Having been in this for 25 years, if I'm honest about it, agility isn't a word that we often use in terms of our audit activities. I mean, we talk about agile auditing, and we talk about being more nimble, but it's hard. And I think one of the reasons it's hard is because we tend to anchor in the cadence of activities that we've gotten comfortable with over the years. And so, for instance, we have an annual audit plan. We take that to the audit committee, they approve it, we execute on that. Our crystal ball isn't really good at looking at what's going to happen in the business environment and the landscape and the risk environment 12, 18 months down the road. So I think the ability to be more nimble and be more agile, and the opportunity to have a conversation that says, I thought this was important, but in the context of what's happening in the world around us, this is important, but it's not as high priority and timely as some of these other things. And so I think there's a continuum of kind of core assurance activities that we have to do based on the risk profile of the company, and where we need to just put the plan aside for a moment and be purposeful in how we react and engage with the environment that we're in, so that the results of our work result in actionable insight. And that's where I fear that if we stay too anchored in the plan we thought we were going to execute, it doesn't become actionable insight. And I think that's what management's expecting from us is, I'll say it for the third time, forgive me, actionable insight on how risk and controls are being managed.
Absolutely. It's the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry, right? I mean, it's just we can sit and do all the planning and look into a year into the future, and things are inevitably going to change. So having that flexibility and that capability is really critical. So just a couple of quick takeaways on this, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So thinking about something you guys can do today, right? Taking a look at that audit plan. Now, I'm telling a bunch of auditors to go look at their audit plan. This is something you're certainly probably already doing I should say, on a regular basis. So kudos to you. But thinking about, what's on that plan, can you tie that back to, maybe a strategic objective or an emerging risk or something that's really meaningful or critical to your organization? Is there an opportunity to reprioritize? I've talked with Jim and Steve and other folks that are friends and clients, and they've all had really interesting perspectives on how they've reprioritized. And also, a very important question, what's not on there that maybe should be? Steve, you kind of alluded to it with your hypothetical audit report, but in all seriousness, do we look at continuity planning? Do we look at, what is the resiliency of the business going forward? So these are all things that we can definitely kind of, as auditors, kind of go in and think about, okay, this is a great way to add value. We are focused on the right things and really helping.
Jason, maybe before we do the
Jason, can I share one more thought?
I was going to mention one item that.
Go ahead, Jim, and then Steve.
On Friday last week, the Institute of Internal Auditors did publish their update to their risk assessment methodology. So
okay.
That's a document that does lay out many of the principles that we're talking about agility and adaptive audit planning. These are concepts that really as a profession we've been talking a lot about the last several years, and I think clearly the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with right now, clearly brings to light the importance of that. Anyone that's operating an audit plan based on last December's risk assessment, it's flawed, right? Mm-hmm. So this to me clearly illustrates the need for that adaptive planning. The guidance does point out the importance of that, and it also talks about sort of the pros and cons of cyclical based auditing. So the audience may want to refer to that as additional guidance. It also does provide some tools for how you might think about developing that plan and presenting it to your stakeholders. So.
No, that's good. That's good information. Steve, what were you going to add there?
Sure. And then I actually just saw a chat pop up from one of the participants. Hopefully I can address your comment here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that in addition to looking at our scope of work and what we're going to do, I think there's a real opportunity for us to do smaller audits, right? And when I say smaller audits, I mean, let's not do a traditional full scope audit of a process or a business unit or whatever, but let's look at a subset of controls, a subset of controls around cash management, a subset of controls around collections, a subset of controls around how do we approve XYZ thing to occur. And let's be really focused and laser focused on those things, which I think helps us to stay nimble. So to the question about agile auditing, I think part of agile auditing is being more focused in scope and putting aside some of the things that we've kind of traditionally bolted on to audits over the years, if you will. And then the other thing I think this naturally leads into is something we all talk about all the time is how do we use data and analytics? And if we can use analytics to be more real-time, looking at the outcomes of this particular set of activities and seeing whether there have been spikes in volume or spikes in backlogs or whatever the event is, that gives us a more current pulse, if you will, of what's happening in the organization so that we don't have to go do an audit. We can just monitor more real time.
Great points. Absolutely. And Steve, that's an interesting concept, the smaller, more focused, more detailed scope, right? And you know, really driving towards what really is important. I think that's a great opportunity. Okay, let's move on to this next topic. Obviously, like I said, we could talk about that for, the three of us could probably talk about it for hours. I'm sure that would be scintillating. But
Nobody needs that.
We'll move on to the next topic. Okay, so the shift in co-sourcing. So will internal audit shops, be more careful about outsourcing, right? Our internal audit shops might be more thoughtful or more careful about what activities they're willing to put outside the organization. There's also going to be, I feel like, a lot more scrutiny. Where is this spend going? Why do we need to bring these resources in from the outside? Is this something that we can augment with internal resources? This isn't to say that outsourcing or co-sourcing is going to completely go away, but certainly there are going to be impacts, right? And again, like I said at the top of the conversation, this also kind of makes me think a little bit more about talent management. Are there new emerging skill sets that auditors are going to require as we move into this new reality? So Steve, I'll start with you here, and just a kind of an open question. How do you see this whole thing shifting and changing, both in terms of outsourcing, co-sourcing, as well as, kind of some of the, the talent management issues that you guys might be facing?
Sure. I'm not sure that my crystal ball is very good on this subject, but I'll share my thoughts. So I'm a really big believer and proponent of strategic co-sourcing. And where I say strategic, what I should probably say instead of that is purposeful, right? And what that means is why are you using a co-sourcer? And there's going to be different use cases for every audit department. And I think what's really important is having a conversation with your stakeholders and with the audit committee around why are we engaging external resources? And in some environments, it's going to be a capacity play, right? We don't have the internal resources to do the work that we think is important to us. So we're going to partner with co-sourcers or third-party providers to help us from a capacity perspective. In other circumstances, it's going to be sourcing skills. We don't have IT skills. We don't have model validation skills. We don't have capital market skills. We don't have, et cetera, specialty skills that we need for specific engagement or body of work, but we don't think it makes sense to retain those skills on staff on a permanent basis. So I think if you start the conversation with what's the reason why we're engaging with this service provider, I think that helps you navigate the landscape a little bit better. I think that there's, my personal opinion, I think there's going to continue to be a need for purposefully engaging with specialty skills that we just can't keep on staff. And that's really probably how I primarily view it. But I think it's going to be specific to every different company and their circumstances. But I think the important thing is getting guidance from the audit committee on what their priorities are so that we're operating in alignment with our audit committee. If our audit committee's directive to us is beef up capacity, well, then we have our marching orders. If our audit committee's directive to us is let's be focused on these specialty skills, then that gives us a direction as well. And I think the alignment is more important than which way we go.
That's a great point. And it's kind of staying on that same compass, right? Are we focusing on the right things? Are we addressing the right things? If a risk area comes up that requires more capacity, like you said, or requires a specific skill set, I totally agree. I mean, there's still going to be an absolute need for augmenting those skills. And, Jim, from that perspective, I'm kind of curious, obviously this whole thing that we're dealing with doesn't just have an impact on these external relationships. What's your view on the overall kind of impact this has on, your own talent management strategy or kind of approach in terms of the skill sets that you're looking for, the types of folks you need on your team to be able to kind of deal with this?
Sure. So when I thought about this question, it was really, my perspective was, what does it mean for our team? And as I've been listening to the news and a lot of the talk about work from home, it relates to businesses in today's environment. Excuse me. One of the concepts that comes up is that there's a concern about the potential for the culture of your team or your company to be negatively impacted because of this work from home environment, and frankly, a lot of other related issues. But as I thought about this question more critically in preparation for our discussion this morning, I was thinking that there could be a different point of view, a different way of thinking about it, and that in fact this is an opportunity to strengthen your culture and strengthen what it means for your team, and to frankly elevate the performance of the team. And a couple of data points that come to mind as I thought about this is, we actually, as a department, we did go through an exercise of developing what we refer to as a team culture statement. And it was really an opportunity for us as a group to think about, why do we show up every day, and what are the reasons that we do that? And there were really a couple of key points that resonated with us when we did this last year. And I think in today's environment are just as important, if not more so. The first thing is to understand as a department, when we had this discussion, sort of a roundtable, there were two really common characteristics that we all talked about. And one is this concept of lifelong learning, and really being someone that is interested in learning and exposing yourself to new ideas, new concepts. And clearly we're in an environment where that is an attribute, that is a behavior that's fundamental to success right now. We have to learn what this new environment means to us and how we can evolve and adapt. The second item that came up in our culture discussion was this notion of many of us that join the internal audit ranks, there's a concept of wanting to help. So being a participant, and I think Steve used the term as well, really helping management in this environment. Those two attributes, as I thought about what's happening right now, are very relevant today. And we have an opportunity, if we think about culture, and those are attributes that define how we behave and how we think, can actually strengthen our culture, despite being in a work from home environment and not physically being in the same space. So the other aspect to culture that came to mind as well as I thought about this really was the concept of trust. And organizations right now, because of the work from home environment, if you perhaps lived in or worked in an organization that had perhaps a lower trust culture, the fact is right now they have to trust you. They have no choice. So I think you're going to see that trust as a concept, as a component of teamwork, will be forced to increase. I think management teams will have to recognize that. And those three key ingredients, this notion of trust, of the ability to learn in this environment and to apply the skills that we have as internal auditors to learn and to grow. And I think also this concept of helping and to use our role as internal auditors to support management, to support our stakeholders, our board, and others, to me, really resonated. So back to the people equation. If we can focus on that, I think we have an opportunity to maintain morale, to continue to keep people focused, to keep people productive, to keep people engaged in the work that has to get done. There's no, I don't think there's any, magic recipe here. Some of these concepts I think applied 9-10 months ago. They've always applied. But in my mind, I think they're amplified, I think, in today's environment. So we do have an opportunity, and that's really the focus that I have on my mind. So.
Yeah, that concept of trust is really interesting, and I think that's something that's been evolving over the last several years. Yeah, one of my internal audit jobs, there was a tremendous amount of trust from our CAE in the fact that she let me move and work remotely, and it had never really been done in the company. So, internal audit might be in a little bit more of an advantageous position there, in that there's a lot of just kind of transient nature to the work that they're doing. You're always, moving somewhere or going on site or what have you. Obviously, that's all going to change to some extent. But you're absolutely right, though, Jim. I think even just as a broader concept, that trusting people to be able to meet their expectations and to do what's being asked of them is a very important thing culturally, regardless of whether you're internal audit or any other part of the organization. Steve, one last kind of lob it back to you real quick. One last question in terms of, this whole concept of co-sourcing, outsourcing, bringing talent in-house, building up the talent pool. is this beg sort of a broader conversation, or is this kind of an opportunity to really sort of evaluate the overall maturity of your audit department? I mean, that is a question that came in from one of the participants. And if so, like, where would you even start to do that?
Sure. Let me go back and pull on one of the points that Jim made first, and I'll try to answer that one if that's okay with you. I saw an article.
And Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt. While you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and launch the next poll and let people just kind of get their thoughts out, but I want to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Sure. Just elaborating on one of Jim's points. I saw an article 3 or 4 years ago in the Atlanta Business Chronicle, and it was very brief. It was a page and a half, but the title of the article was "Curiosity is Essential to Problem Solving," and it talked about just kind of the core skills involved in assessing and teasing apart problems and understanding the root cause and why things are happening the way they are, so you can come up with a good solution. And as I read that article, what really resonated with me is that's exactly internal audit, and that's exactly the job that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I did was I printed that out, and then where it says problem solving, I scratched that out and I wrote internal audit. So the title of the article became "Curiosity is Essential to Internal Audit," and I PDF that and sent that out to the team, and then we had a conversation about it. And the reason I think that's important is, as I think when I think about talent and maturing our talent, I think someone who really desires to understand why and go deeper than just kind of the first level of analysis and analytics, and there's a sign off and it's on the corner of the page, but what does that really mean? I think those people are going to be more successful, and they're going to be able to help partner with management in advancing the dialogue and kind of getting back to what I said earlier about actionable insight. So that's kind of my overall thought. To your question about, is this the time to assess maturity of an internal audit function? I'm on the fence a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share with you why. I mean, and I'm not trying to backpedal on anything I've said in the last 30 minutes, because I think those are all the right things. But as I think about this current environment, I think our teams, our colleagues, the people that we work with, I think they're looking to us for stability, right? And so there's a certain part of me that says, yes, let's do these things that we've talked about in the last 30 minutes. But I also think when I think about the people aspect of this, the stress that people are under, the impact of moving from an office environment to a virtual environment,
Mm-hmm.
the impact of just being home every day and not being able to separate from work the way we're used to, I think there's a fatigue that sets in over time. And so I wouldn't want to set ourselves up for a maturity analysis that suggests we do radical change. I think we need to take this opportunity to make sure that we're taking care of people, right? Start there. That's the first thing. Let's make sure we're taking care of people. And we're sensitive to what's going on in people's lives as we go through this set of events. And there's things that are happening in your life, Jason, and your life, Jim, and the other 132 people that I'm completely unaware of. I need to be sensitive that even if I don't know what those things are, there are other things going on. And so I think that this is a time to make sure that we're partnering with our businesses and we're doing the things we've talked about, but it's also a time from a talent perspective where I think we need to support people and make sure that people understand that, we're going to get through this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've talked about with people is it's okay to step away from your computer in the middle of the day. It's okay to go out in the middle of the day and get some exercise, or just shut down for a while and do whatever, because we're all processing and navigating the set of activities differently. So I don't know if I really hit the point you were asking about, Jason, but when I think about assessing the maturity of the audit function, that's probably not where my head is right now. My head is, how are we engaging with the business and how are we taking care of our people?
I think that's a fair point, and I wrote that down. It's okay to get away during the day, because that's something that I have definitely struggled with. I come up here into my little tower and I kind of lock myself in, and I'm like, I just want to get through everything for the day. And you're right, after a while that can take a toll on you for sure. So I'll quickly share these results just in terms of outsourcing, and we can certainly talk about other things you can do. But first, it seems that the vast majority are either not currently outsourcing, they have the whole internal audit activity in-house, or there's really no change or even an increase in activity. That's an interesting point as well. So some of the things, obviously, if you think about this outsourcing, right, doesn't sound like a lot of people are really doing anything drastic or dramatic here. And maybe that's the lesson here is this is not, kind of to your point, Steve, this isn't necessarily the time to rock the boat or to flip the table over and do things completely differently. This is more of that time to demonstrate that level of stability and that, that certainty that you guys can bring to the table. But this advice, this slide can probably apply at any point in time. It's never a bad idea to go revisit how you're staffing the department, how you're augmenting those skills. And there are always going to be situations where those skills need to be augmented. It's just, kind of thinking about it in light of the current situation. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. My favorite one. Greater reliance on technology means we're going to need to adopt required technical capability. So if I was sitting here and I was reading an article from Internal Auditor magazine and it told me that internal audit, hey, this is the time, you guys really need to sharpen your skills and, get on board with new technology, I would be hard pressed to tell you if that article was from 2020 or 1999. This seems to have been a constant drumbeat throughout the course of time. But let's face it, now that, kind of what we've already been talking about, these remote working relationships, your ability to audit effectively systems and in processes and individuals that you can't get in front of and see and feel and touch. And, Steve, you even mentioned printing out the article, which I still do that. It's not as easy, right? So this almost is a necessity now. So this has been a constant drumbeat, but the bigger question is, are we now in a position where you really have no choice but to accelerate? So Jim, do you see the pandemic as almost like a tipping point here? Where do you think internal audit sort of stands here, and maybe what direction should they move?
Yeah, I think, Jason, you set up this question pretty well, but I'm going to steal from Steve's trick and go back to the last question.
Okay.
Partly because I think it's really, to me, one of the most important issues that we're all dealing with, and it really goes back to the people. And it really needs to be, one of the most important things that we consider in this environment is, what does it mean for our teams? What does it mean for our stakeholders? And Steve, I want you to send me that article you mentioned, because that to me is exactly the way I think about audit and why I've enjoyed the work that I've done for so many years. And one story I will point out: when I took over the role of the department, the audit chair at the time, his feedback to me is the most important attribute I want you to have is intellectual curiosity. And he thought that was a defining characteristic of the audit profession. And as I think about the people equation, this is really an opportunity for all of you to reflect on that question I asked earlier. Why did you join this profession? Why do you continue to work in this profession? And I think that you'll find that many of us do agree. It is the learning opportunities. It's the passion for helping to problem solve. And I think in this environment, we have a great opportunity to use both of those skills and to really emphasize that, which is also now great sort of segue into this notion of technology. So as you pointed out, Jason, back in grad school, we talked about this topic and we still talk about it. And I think some departments do this well. Others are learning to mature. I tend to agree with Steve that we do have an opportunity to reevaluate our policies, our practices in terms of how we do the work that we're doing. But there will be some challenges. The fact is the companies will be going through a lot of change. The ability to execute many of these technical goals, analytics, et cetera, will require involvement from our stakeholders, and they may not have the time or the bandwidth right now to support this. So those are real issues that we have to deal with. But I do think that this is something we should always be thinking of. And as we reflect on all aspects of the work that we're doing right now, this is clearly an area that we should be focusing on. The one area that I will point out that we should spend more time on immediately is the notion of technology to support our risk assessment process. And in my mind, this is an area where we can, think about leveraging data and analytics that exist in the organization, key performance indicators, key risk indicators that we can feed into our risk assessment methodology to create a more agile approach. The other companion point I would make regarding that is, and it's not necessarily technology, it's more process, But in my mind, this is also an opportunity for us to partner with our second line of defense in a more effective manner, that we can really use what we're dealing with right now as an opportunity to bring together our skill sets, frankly, our training and so forth, to come together and understand how we think about risk and begin to move forward, together. So I think it's a great opportunity to collaborate with the second line as well. So kind of took your question and danced around it a little bit, but those are some thoughts, Jason.
That's what people usually do with my questions, Jim. That's all right. And especially when I was an auditor, they were really great about dancing around my questions. No, I think that's a great response, though. I think it kind of gets back to what Steve was saying is, is this the time for a big wholesale change or investment? Probably not. And, you're not going to have the support, the bandwidth. It's just not the right time. And it almost kind of goes back to Steve's point about even the smaller scoped audits, a smaller scope of technological improvement, right? Like if there's a place you can laser focus, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jim. If the real focus is how do we make sure we're properly aligning ourselves with the areas of the organization that most need our attention, let's make that the focus. Let's find opportunities to leverage technology and data and analytics to drive that piece of the process. And then when that starts to work, maybe there's a natural expansion from there. Steve, I'm kind of interested to hear your perspective. What trends do you might be seeing, and more importantly, I guess, getting back to this whole concept of internal audit adding value, how does advancing those technology skills allow you to do that?
Sure. I tend to think of these in buckets. And the two buckets that I tend to think of this conversation in is technology that we use within the internal audit function to improve quality of our documentation, efficiency and delivery, all those things, right? That's one bucket of technology. The other bucket of technology is what's the technology that we employ to actually audit better, right? That we deploy outward facing from the internal audit activity out to the business. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think about primarily analytics and how we use data. It's interesting, we've been, to Jim's point and yours as well, we've been having this conversation as long as I've been in internal audit. And I remember using certain tools like ACL and IDEA and some others 20 plus years ago. And they're great tools and they're very, very valuable. The thing that I think has changed from my perspective is I always found that those tools, while valuable, I had to know the question that I was going to ask in advance, and then the tool would help me to answer those questions. What I find to be really powerful about some of the tools that are available today, Power BI, Tableau, others, what I find to be powerful about those tools is they help me figure out what the question is, which to me is more valuable. The other thing that I find is the technology tools that are available today that I don't think we've fully incorporated into our audit delivery lifecycle means we can communicate with our stakeholders in a more interactive way. When I think about the audit reports that we develop, the audit reports that we develop today look very much and feel very much and read very much like the audit reports we developed 25 years ago. And so I think there's an opportunity to use technology not only in how we deliver and perform our work, but how do we communicate the results of our work to stakeholders. And if we can communicate to our stakeholders in a way that fosters a conversation, I think that's a good outcome. To the first bucket, so if I had to choose between investing in bucket A and bucket B, I wouldn't want it to be all or nothing, but I would probably tend to invest in bucket B, because that's what improves the quality of our insightful feedback to management and positions us as really being kind of a trusted advisor because we're going deeper and having better results. Back to bucket A, I think looking at what are the tools that we use to manage the audit function, to manage work papers, to manage scheduling, to do the risk assessment, all these things, I think that's the other big area of investment. And that's where I think we have a lot of opportunity to move up the efficiency curve. Yeah. And sorry, the last thought on that, and then particularly in an environment like this, where I don't think we're going back to where we were, the ability to work together virtually and to collaborate on and pass things back and forth and have automated workflow, I think is where the world is today. And I think it's going to continue to go that way.
Yeah, great points. It seems like we're kind of, in this, and I'll share the results of the poll here. It seems like in terms of where we're going, it's in the general theme of the conversation. It's, let's focus on the most critical, the most important things first. And then as, maybe as things settle down or we start to settle into something that feels like a new normal, then it's not that those other opportunities should go by the wayside, but it's really, even when we think about our audit plan or our employment of technology or our use of co-source or outsource resources, make it very strategically focused, go where the biggest value is going to be provided or obtained, and then sort of extrapolate out from there. And you could see that, certainly there's a lot of folks that are using a lot of different capabilities, a lot of different types of technology. It's interesting. I'll be definitely interested to hear from the folks who are using automated testing, robotic process automation. I suspect as we go forward in 2 or 3 years, that percentage is going to tick even higher. All right, so I want to be respectful of time, so let's go through and kind of review here what we've got. So, this is maybe not the time to do that full-blown evaluation of your technical capabilities, but I think both to Jim and Steve's point, what are the areas that we can laser focus in on where there can be immediate gains, immediate value? Jim talked about enhancing and helping to inform that risk evaluation process, and Steve, certainly you talked about, kind of going where the sort of the meat of it is, and then expanding out from there. I think those are all great, great areas to start or great direction to give folks. Okay. Next topic. This one sparked some interesting conversation between the three of us, right? Internal auditors will become educators in their industry and in their organization. So obviously internal audit's uniquely positioned, right? In some ways, this has always been true, right? However, there traditionally are logically sort of segregated or separated from the rest of the organization. So I think this really kind of speaks to this concept of adding value, right? Will we see a shift in what that means? And will we see a shift or an increase or a change in how internal audit plays a part in that whole concept within their organization? So Steve, do you feel like, internal audit as an educator is a good role for them? How do you see that evolving?
Interesting one. So I think that I'm hesitating and I'm pausing a little bit at the word educator. And I would probably prefer to use the word advisor. And I know we've been using the word advisor for decades, but I think there's a connotation between advisor and educator that I'd like to differentiate a little bit. Educator implies to me a student-teacher relationship where the educator knows more and is imparting knowledge on the pupil. And I don't feel like that's the conversation that I'm positioned to have with my business partners in management, right? There's an advisement role, and I have a point of view and a perspective where I don't know more than they do, but I have a different perspective because my seat at the table has a different angle. And so what I'd rather do is continue to advise people on how do we think about risk? How do we think about controls and being nimble and where we want to adjust things from an advisory perspective, but I don't think I have something to teach them, if that makes sense to you. I'm sorry to parse your word, but it's just kind of the way I thought about it. The other piece of this in terms of adding value is I think to add more value, I think we as auditors probably have to take more risk sometimes. And a lot of us, I think, are in this profession and we do this work because we're somewhat risk averse, and most of our conversations are about reducing or managing risk. But to earn and to expand your seat at the table, you've got to be willing to share your perspective. And sometimes that involves taking risk. And I certainly am not advocating that we say everything we think, but I am advocating that we probably take a little bit more risk in the conversation. And rather than go off and do 160 hours of field work to prove the point that it's raining outside, let's just make the observation that it's raining outside. And that might be a silly example, so pardon me, but I think to add value and to expand our seat at the table, we probably have to take a little more risk and probably be a little bit more candid, constructively and appropriately, a little bit more candid around what our opinions are, even if we can't always tie all of our opinions back to 200 hours of test work.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I
So
don't feel
I think I just violated all the standards. So no one tell Richard. But
due diligence, independence, objectivity. Yeah, I mean, it's just all out the window. No, I know what you're saying though, Steve. And I don't think you're parsing the word. I understand that the connotation that educator versus student does have for some folks. And it's a great point. You know, it's really it's that partnering thing. But in order to be viewed as a partner, you can't just be viewed as the one that stands off to the side and does things always very mechanical and by the book, even though that in many situations, that's the only way to do it. Sometimes there are leaps that need to be made. So, you know, Jim, if you think about, you know, internal audit being put in this position as a value adder, as a, you know, let's put aside the term educator, but as an advisor, you know, what sort of skill sets or capabilities does audit possess that really allow them to kind of insert themselves into this conversation?
Sure. So, I do think, Steve, you know, your point about taking risks with, you know, being more forthright and candid and you know, essentially being very open to management about issues or concerns. You know, that's really the opportunity that we all have. And those conversations are not always comfortable, but that's something that we have to step up and perform against. The concept of what I think is helpful for auditors, or how we can support management in these areas right now, is we are all trained to think about risk assessment and, frankly, problem solving. And I think that's a skill set, you know, to your point, Steve, about serving as an advisor. I think the best advisors are often ones that ask you questions and they get you thinking about the issue from a different perspective. And that's sort of the approach. I think good internal auditors, when we're doing the work well, that's the mindset, that's the approach that we have. We're inquisitive, we ask good questions, we're challenging our stakeholders to think about the issue from a different point of view, and that may lead to a more appropriate solution. So I think the skill set that really comes to mind is that sort of concept of problem solving through good discovery questions and that curiosity that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim. I think curiosity is a great word for it, and I think that's one of the things when I got into internal audit. To be quite frank, I didn't quite know what it was. I was just happy to have a job offer, and I was really lucky to get into that profession, even though I probably was a little naive. It puts you in a very unique position and gives you sort of a certain, you know, kind of cachet, if you will, to be able to, you know, be that person who asks those probing questions. That's a great position to be in if you are curious, if you genuinely want to understand how things work, if you're that person who likes to tinker or deconstruct things. I think audit's a great place to do that. And I think inevitably when you do that, you kind of almost learn how to better put those things back together. Not necessarily better than the person who built it, but you might see something that they don't see. So Jim, you talk about kind of seeing things from a different perspective as well. I think that's super valuable. Real quick, just as a matter of housekeeping, I know we're running up on the top of the hour. As long as Jim and Steve are okay with it, I'd like to make sure we explore this last topic. Again, just for those of you who unfortunately might have to drop, this is being recorded and we promise it won't run too much longer. Okay, so really quick, I'm going to share these poll results. Hopefully, even just in taking this poll, what we were hoping is just to give you some ideas of different methods that internal audit could potentially employ to, you know, to kind of bridge that communication with the rest of the organization, right? You know, helping with the knowledge center or giving presentations on those things that you've learned through those kind of curiosity conversations. And, you know, just one idea or one thought is, and this is something I've done in prior departments, right, is just kind of town halls, engaging with the organization, just finding ways to get in front of them, to share information, you know, to share knowledge, maybe even turning some of that back to some of the folks in your organization who may be thinking in the terms of everything they do comes in from or goes into a black box. One of the greatest satisfactions in internal audit is helping somebody understand how their work impacts somebody else. So I think those are all great ways to become, you know, sort of that resource within your organization. Okay, last topic. We will all go back to the office, or will we? I will tell you this, since approximately mid-March, this is probably the third time I've put on a collared shirt. I have not shaved, obviously. Much to the chagrin of my wife, I have this horrible looking mustache on here. So I'm sitting here in my house. I'm trying to follow all of this shelter in place. And now there's talk in different parts of the country of, okay, it's time to go back. You can go back. The office is open. In reality, I in my opinion, there's really no going back. There's not going to be a going back to the way it was. It just simply doesn't seem like that's going to happen. And if that's the case, what does this new normal look like? And more importantly, what does it mean in terms of how you manage your teams, how you interact with your team? So, Jim, I'm kind of curious to hear from you. What is the most important consideration for you when you're thinking about how your team is going to operate, even when you're allowed to come back into the routine, so to speak?
So I think that the concepts or the thoughts that come to mind are, again, just to focus on the concept of, the team first and the employee first. So understanding the safety and the individual expectations of the employees will be very important, will be very critical. I don't think that anyone has an answer right now. You probably read the headline yesterday that Twitter announced that they will have a permanent work from home scenario. I think some of the companies on the West Coast are saying they're going to stay at home now through the end of the year. So this is a very, I would say, fluid subject. From my standpoint, when I think about what that future state looks like, I go back to that notion of the culture statement and what really matters. Regardless of where we work, whether it's from home or different offices, if we're all united in terms of the reason we show up and the reason that we choose to work at the companies we're at, and we understand that, and we're results oriented, and we hold each other accountable, and we support each other. To me, that is the most important, focus as I think about, kind of that go forward. The fact is, my day, typically even before the pandemic, I was on video conferences with my team in different locations. So in a lot of respects, I think we will continue to work in this environment on some level. There have been some positives. I would say that because of the video conferencing that we're doing now, it's more frequent. I'm seeing people probably, frankly, more frequently today than I was before. It's also forcing us to think about being more deliberate in our interactions with people. So we have stepped up our one-on-one meetings. We've added some additional team meetings into our cadence of interactions, really talking and emphasizing that among the team to reach out and to utilize frankly, also the technology that we have. So we've rolled out Teams. We have different tools that we can use to collaborate. All that is important as we think about that future state. It can work. We will figure this out. I think it's likely, to your point, Jason, that the work from home scenario, I did a little research on it before discussion today. It was a very small percentage of U.S. Companies that allowed for, I would say, aggressive or work from home policies. And now we're all doing it. And I think a lot of companies are proving that this model can work. So certainly on some level, your company will be more open to this going forward. And I think as department heads, as leaders of internal audit departments, it's important for us to recognize that. And I think we can continue to strengthen our culture. We can continue to do some great things. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim. Absolutely. And I think it does come down to sort of this concept of, I like that you saw the positives, by the way, the more connection, more deliberate interaction. There are definitely silver linings, right? But obviously the fact of the matter remains that, to your point, not a lot of organizations were kind of hip to this whole thing before all of this kind of went down. Steve, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball because I think a really great question came in. The question from Bartholomew came in and says, many companies are using COVID as an opportunity to reduce staffing levels. He's, realizes we don't have the crystal ball, but if you think about what the future of the IA department looks like in terms of how it operates, the level of staffing, what do you think those impacts are going to be, and kind of what should go back to the way it was, and what do you think should change? So just a few things for you, Steve.
Just a little light question there to close out our conversation today. So I've also seen, both directly and anecdotally, a couple of instances where, as companies have been conservative and tried to preserve preserve cash and manage expenses, I've seen where the internal audit's been impacted.
Yeah.
And my personal observation is I hate to hear that. And I think that's a little bit short-sighted, and I hate it. It's really discouraging to me. The flip side to it, and to answer your forward-looking question, if I can, is I think what the future holds for us is what we make of it. And so while we're in this set of activities that we're all navigating as best we can, with an imperfect map, I think what the future looks like is largely going to be based on how we engage, how we demonstrate partnership, how we demonstrate value as we go through this. And not to echo my own words too much, but if we write that hypothetical audit report, then I think we're not going to be viewed as adding a lot of value.
Mm-hmm.
But if 12, 18 months from now, management can look back and the board can look back and say, you know what, internal audit was in the trenches with us. In internal audit, they got in the boat, they picked up an oar, and they helped us row. And what that rowing looks like, it has a lot of different flavors that we've talked about over the last hour, but I think there's an engagement there that's value added, that's different than that hypothetical audit report. And that, to me, is going to be at least partially the determinant of what the future of this looks like for us. And so while we're in this crazy time, and there aren't even the right words to describe what we're all going through right now, I believe there's also an opportunity in terms of how we engage and how we position ourselves going forward.
That's a great point, Steve. This is sort of the great unknown, and this is probably one of the most human elements of the whole thing is, how are we going to allow people to carry on their work? Are we still are we gonna find some people in situations where maybe they're, out of sight, out of mind? Let's hope not. Jim, to your point, we've kind of forced everybody's hand in terms of being able to change their mindset on this. And I'm going to go ahead and just quickly share these polling results, which are kind of right along the lines of where I thought they would be. I fall squarely into that 50%, right? I see myself sort of rotating between the two. What's really interesting to me are the 21% who are just kind of still waiting it out, still trying to figure it out. And believe me, I kind of thought that might even be higher. I can understand that we're still in this time of uncertainty, right? It's just one of those things where nobody really knows. Nobody really has the answer. And in many ways that can be a scary thing. So I completely understand that sentiment as well. So just to kind of close things out, what does this look like in the future, or what is the opportunity that stands in front of us, right? Using the pandemic as a catalyst for change. And Jim, I think you definitely talked about this, the engagement with the team. Let's figure out and work with the team and say, what's going to work best for you? I know how you work. I know how you add value. I know what you bring to the table. Let's make it more of a dialogue as opposed to a mandate. And kind of just working the best way you possibly can. You guys both find yourselves in interesting situations. Jim, your team is kind of already split between two geographic locations. Steve, you recently started a position where pretty much all of your team is somewhere else from where you are. So you guys have, always, kind of had no choice but to adapt to this. And here's hoping that, there can certainly be more adaptability here and less fear and uncertainty, and more just, letting humans do what they do best, and that's adapt. So,
Jason,
go ahead, Steve.
Even
please.
more interesting than that. No, so I know you know this, but for the 103 people who are still left, thanks for hanging in there with us.
Yes.
First of all, I started my current job on March 30th. So I've actually never met any of my internal audit colleagues in person, not one in person. All of our engagement has been either through calls like this, or Skype chat sessions, or just old-fashioned voice calls. And what I would share is, I can't believe how well it's gone. It's been fantastic. And I am looking forward to getting back in the office. I'm looking forward to spending time with people and, going to get coffee with people and all those things. But I would tell you that the technology and the ability to do calls like this where we can see each other and have a face-to-face conversation, even if it's not in the same room, is much better than I would have thought. And the thing that I've always worried about with teleworking, I never really worry too much about whether people are getting their work done, because that will take care of itself. The thing I've always been sensitive to is that communication suffers.
Hmm.
You know, I'm worried that people are at home and their communication with their teammates and their colleagues and their stakeholders deteriorates. But what's been fantastic about the technology that we have here is it's let's be honest, it's a little bit awkward, but it's equally awkward for everybody. And so everyone's had to kind of get over it, right? Get over yourself and get on the call and recognize that you see your face on the screen. And so I would say, and I'm rambling, I apologize to the 101 people who are 100. It's going down by the minute.
Steve, you're
They're dropping off, Steve. They're dropping off.
Yeah, I would say, you know, being in a unique situation where I've never physically met any of my teammates, I think it's going really well, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity, and I think we're doing good work.
That speaks to that.
They're stabilized. No one else has dropped since the last 5-7 seconds. Thanks for hanging in there, guys.
That speaks to that adaptability factor for sure. Jim, what kind of closing thoughts do you have on this whole thing?
Yeah, I think that you know, from my perspective, the word that's on my mind every day is patience, and really just trying to understand what this all means. And you know, we use the word adaptability as well. So as I think about where we're at today, it is continuing to be patient. And I also, Steve used the term, you know, taking some risks. And I think that as we think about the work that we do, the relationships, you know, what we're doing as a department, as a function, as a profession, taking calculated risks to see if we can do things better, to see if we can help. And the example you gave about the video calls, I was with you on that. I was not a big fan. But now I'm doing it. So it's one example that illustrates we have to adapt and that we can get through this. And, you know, so maybe the final thought there is, you know, coming back to the team is just understanding that we're all experiencing this from a different perspective, a different point of view. And it's very important now for us to understand that, to be good listeners and to be patient. So those are perhaps my final thoughts, Jason.
That's very well said. And, you know, the only other thing I'll share, and this is, you guys know enough about me that I get a little flighty sometimes, but in this sense, you know, the thing I always try to keep in mind is that, you know, no matter what's happening, the technology and the stress and the concern that's swirling around, you know, we're all human beings. We're all susceptible. We're all vulnerable. And sometimes it's okay to be like that. But, you know, getting back to both of your points about being patient with people, opening up those lines of communication. My big thing, and Jim and Steve, you guys both know this about me. My big thing is keep those lines of communication open, but not just from a work perspective. Keep them open from a human perspective. You know, maintain those connections with people. You know, get your awkward looking face, my awkward looking face on the screen, and just chat with people, see how they're doing, check in with them. I think, Steve, you made the point perfectly where it's like, you know, you said it earlier. I don't know what everybody else is dealing with. I don't know what other sort of weight they're carrying along with them, aside from having to work from home and dealing with kids, e-learning and all of that. So, you know, just trying to kind of support each other, be kind to each other is to me the fundamental thing. But I think from a practical standpoint, you guys are both absolutely right. Communication, patience, adaptability, and we can definitely get through this. So, you know, with that, guys, I first want to just say a huge thank you to Jim and to Steve for agreeing to participate. I really value your guys, you know, your friendship, and I value your opinions, and I'm really happy that you guys were able to be a part of this today. And I also want to thank everyone who took the time to be a part of this conversation, to participate. I apologize for not getting live to a lot of these questions, but as is often the case, we work to try to answer all of your questions. I'll definitely look to get Steve and Jim's feedback on some of those as well and share that with you. So thank you. Please take care, and really appreciate everyone being a part of this.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks.